every country you can imagine we're in, we've got some sort of presence there, whether it's an office or a plant. We have about 2 million customers, very diverse portfolio, which we'll also talk about a little bit later. Our customers can range from a huge company like Samsung or Intel or SpaceX, all the way down to a very small mom and pop kind of welding shop and everything in between. In terms of size, we're large. We've got 80,000 employees worldwide. We hold 6,500 active patents. Actually, and I think that number was from 2018, so we probably have more now. But we've got a lot of people that are innovating, doing research and development type work, coming up with new products and applications and solutions. So that's why we have so many patents. And then another thing I wanted to mention too, down in the lower left-hand corner, is the charitable giving. So that's something that's just important to our company in general. It's one of our key focuses in terms of giving back to the communities in which we live and work. So in 2018, we gave 15 million back to the communities, and also in sponsorships too. Sponsorships and sponsorships and money and grants that we've given to different colleges for students to be able to pay for their schooling. So a lot of money given back, which is great. In terms of our vision, so we want to be the best performing global industrial gas and engineering company in the world. Our mission though is to make the world more productive. So a lot of our gases help create the best kind of solutions for our customers, whereby they're not using a lot of energy. We're focused on sustainability and protecting our planet. Those are all key things that we think about daily. And in terms of our values, safety is listed there as the first thing, and that is always number one. You know, when you're working with different types of gases, things can get very dangerous. There's a lot of risk involved. So safety is our number one focus. If we're not talking about employees that are out in the field working directly with the gases, then we're talking about, how we're behaving inside our buildings, our office buildings. And, there's a big focus on safety in terms of holding on to the stair railings, not walking and looking at a cell phone and having your face down and not paying attention to where you're going. So it's always something that is on our mind. Secondary to that would be integrity, then accountability. Inclusion is something worth talking about as well. Diversity and inclusion is a huge focus of ours, especially in talent acquisition. So when we're talking about hiring folks for whether it be Danbury or Tonawanda or Texas or someplace in China, one thing that we focus on as a recruitment team is making sure that we're presenting our managers with a diverse slate of candidates to pick from. So that is a key focus of ours. And then lastly, community. So, like we talked about on the last slide, giving back to the communities. And if it's not money and donations, then it's our time. We spend a lot of time volunteering in schools. We have a team called the STEAM team that goes into classrooms and does, fun demonstrations for students to try to kind of get them interested in STEM careers. And that's another way that we give back. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Lauren, I have one. You mentioned the sustainability focus and the charitable focus. Do candidates need to have those core values or communicate those core values if they are to apply to opportunities within your organization?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think that if they've had exposure to those values, then I think that it's a good idea to highlight them on the interview. I think it's part of a student doing research about a company ahead of time, knowing the company that they're talking to and what the values of the company are, and then trying to relate it back to experiences that they've had. So would definitely recommend that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this is just a map operating in more than 100 countries. We try to establish presence where we have customers, where we have end users, and where operations are growing. This kind of gives us really good knowledge in terms of how to execute projects. Building a plant in China is very different than building a plant in Texas or the Gulf region. So we have all of that knowledge because we've worked in all these different geographies, how to execute a project and how to build a plant and how to grow our business. So that's a really interesting part of working here, is that a little bit of what everybody does has some global reach. In terms of career paths, so listed over on the left are some business groups. So corporate functions, which we talked about, are mostly situated in Danbury, Connecticut. So accounting, HR, finance, tax, legal, and a couple of others. Global functions primarily sit here in Tonawanda, where I'm located. We've got a whole separate group that does engineering. And when I say that, I mean, they're the group of people that are really designing and building and constructing the new industrial gas plants that we're building. We've got a gases unit that's primarily out of Texas, our Woodlands office. We have another business unit called Praxair Surface Technologies out of Indianapolis. They manufacture coatings that are used on rotating equipment. Some of our coatings are actually used on aircraft. We do a lot of business with the aircraft industry. And then Praxair Electronics is another business unit. They, just one example, because I don't know a whole lot about them, but I know that they manufacture the chips that are used in cell phones. They're in Orangeburg, New York, so they're a little bit closer to where you guys are located. And then PDI, Praxair Distribution Inc., is another business unit. They're the business unit that packages up our gases and our oxygen that's used in home healthcare in a lot of, hospitals and places like that. People that need it both in a medical office or, maybe somebody that needs it in their home. That would fall under PDI. The locations we talked about a little bit. So depending on where you're interested in going, our career site's really good. We've got positions posted everywhere. You can see the locations. If you're open to going anywhere, I think that's probably the best approach, especially when you're graduating from school and you're looking for an entry-level position. The more flexible you are on where you'll go, I think the better your chances are of getting a position. Sometimes it's difficult for us to find people that will come to Buffalo, for example, because of the weather, and we get a little bit of bad PR in terms of what it's like to live here during the winter months. But if you're open to it, it's a great place to work, get some terrific experience, and it doesn't mean you stay here for the remainder of your career. Maybe you come for a couple years. But again, flexibility in that area is really is a good thing. In terms of our products, so like I mentioned, we're a large company. We've got a lot of different products. I tried to list some examples here of things that might be applicable to you as a student. So in terms of our atmospheric gases, nitrogen, for example, if you've ever had nitro brewed coffee from Starbucks, or soft drinks like beer or soda, the nitrogen could have come from us. It could have come from one of our competitors, but that's one thing that we do. And the other thing too, bag of chips. Sometimes, you buy it in the grocery store and it's filled with air. It's only got half the product in it and the rest is air. That would be nitrogen, and that could come from us as well. So other gases, oxygen, argon. We manufacture some really rare gases like krypton, neon, and xenon as well. There are a lot of process gases like acetylene, helium, propane, carbon dioxide. Again, that's actually where the carbonation comes in soft drinks and beer as well. And in terms of COVID, so one thing that we've been working on recently is our carbon dioxide has been used to keep the COVID vaccine cold and for large scale refrigeration as well. Specialty gases, so electronic gases like arsine, phosphine, xylene, and mixtures, as well as instrument gases and mixtures would fall under that category. And then we've got a whole nother category just for medical gases. So medical oxygen that's used in hospitals and healthcare, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, if you go to the dentist and you need to be, you need to get that in order to help you relax for the procedure, that could come from us. So you can see that we've got a wide variety of products across many different industries. That philosophy of not actually having all of our eggs in one basket has helped us weather the storm with COVID, because we aren't just focused on one industry. And if that industry gets hit, then the company, doesn't do well. We work across a whole range of areas. So if one is on the decline, it usually works out where the others are on the upswing, and they kind of balance each other out. In terms of our supply model, so we've got large customers, like I mentioned, like Samsung and SpaceX. Those are customers that need enough of our product that we actually build a plant for them on site. It's either on site or it's just over the fence on a adjacent property, and we pipeline it into them. Then we've got smaller customers, so that might fall under that merchant category, that need product from us, but they don't need a plant built. They might need a lesser amount, and we deliver it to them through these trucks. And typically, those customers will have a tank of some sort on their property that we fill for them. And then the last is packaged gas. So we have our own plants that we build for ourselves for Linde. We don't always just build plants for customers. We'll build our plants, sometimes keep them for ourselves, and then take the gases off of the plants, package them up, and then send them out in cylinders to customers. So when I was talking earlier about like a small mom and pop welding shop, they would use our packaged gas. So we can service a whole different group of customers depending on what their needs are. We typically have a supply solution for them. In terms of our engineering business, because that is a very big piece of what we do, we either build the plants for ourselves, we build them for third-party customers. The majority of those are air separation plants. We also do hydrogen and syngas. Along the bottom, you can see we work very closely with the chemical industry. So we've got a lot of activity that happens in the Gulf region of the United States in terms of petrochemical and natural gas. So some of our products, just in terms of what we do for them, some of our products are used to actually clean out their pipelines, the gas pipelines. So we actually, after I had my initial call with Annie, and we talked about, wanting to talk about rotational programs on this call, I went back and did a little bit of research and realized that we actually have, I think, 4 or 5 different types of rotations. We're in a little bit of a standstill with them right now just because of COVID, but during a normal year, our high top program will take place. Usually recruitment for this program starts in the fall, and who we're recruiting for that are college seniors. So they're college seniors with engineering backgrounds. Typically, they'll be a chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, or electrical. And that program is run out of our Woodlands, Texas office. So when you sign up for that program, when you apply to it, you have to go through a pretty rigorous interview process. If you're selected, what it means is that you're committing to 2.5 years with the company. And it's a nice rotation where you start off your first 6 months working at a plant site, and then you do 2 12-month rotations in different functional areas depending on what your interests are. So you get a variety of experience, you get to develop different skill sets, you get to meet and interact with different people in the company, different stakeholders, and then you're also assigned a mentor too. So in addition to working with the other students in the program, you're also assigned a mentor that's going to help you through those 2.5 years. Currently, we've got about 10 participants in various stages of the program. It's really a feeder program for us that we hire college graduates into this program, keep them in it for 2.5 years, and then from there, they usually go work at a specific location of their choice if we happen to have an opening. So some come directly from college to us. Some of them were summer interns for us. But right now, this is kind of like the largest group that we've ever had at one point. And it's because we take a look ahead at who's retiring from the business, who's moving out of the business or being promoted. And then we try to backfill those positions with these candidates. Any questions on that program? Okay. And then one of the other programs I thought we would highlight for those of you that aren't engineers, this is called our, we call it COLP, Commercial Operations Leadership Program. And that's run out of our Indianapolis office. This is a program that gives you exposure to not just the engineering side, but retail sales, outside sales, production, distribution, productivity, safety, and finance. So it's a really nice way to get exposure to all of those areas. You develop your leadership skills as well. So we've got workshops that we put you in. You get to network with senior managers. There is some formal training for this as well. But the rotation's a little bit different. It's not as if you're in each of those segments for 6 months. You know, they kind of tailor it to what you're looking for. But you could be in different locations across the US. The recruiter that actually recruits for this program sits in Indianapolis, but you could be placed in different offices from the list that I showed you on the previous slide. So again, for engineers, non-engineers, they'll hire people with supply chain background, people with finance background, people that have an interest in sales, whether it's retail or outside sales. But that's another nice program that we offer as well. Same timeline as the last program, where we start to recruit for it in the fall, and the candidates usually start in this program in June. And then the last slide. So, you know, if you're not looking for a rotational opportunity, maybe you're looking for just an internship, our Danbury office usually hosts several interns in these different departments. So IT, legal, tax, and occasionally we'll have them in HR. We usually post the positions on our career site in the fall, start recruitment, you know, as early as we can. Usually that's around Thanksgiving. And then we try to fill the majority of the positions by January, February. I'll say this year we're a little bit behind because of COVID. So I think most of the positions for this summer are filled. I believe we've got a couple open left within our tax department. So if anybody's interested, I would definitely recommend you reach out. We can have a conversation about it. You know, there's lots of different areas of the company that you could work in. If you were looking for an internship in a different location outside of Connecticut, we can have that chat as well, because there are different locations that will host them. And I think that's my last slide. So
Lauren, I love that you talked about, you know, the willingness to pivot, right? For if a student's interests and values align with your company, which you have such tremendous values, the ability to go anywhere is really going to transform their career path and their professional development. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I hope the students all heard that part too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's for me on my end, there's a big difference between interviewing a student that has done their research and knows the company, and versus a student that really just applied but doesn't know anything about the company. I mean, I ask my candidates when I'm interviewing them, what do you know about Linde? So you might be hard pressed to come up with some information that you've gleaned from the website or from the press if you're familiar with the company, but you should always be prepared to share what you know about the company, and make sure that you really have a genuine interest in working with us, and to show that as well on the interview.
Lauren, can you talk a little bit about, you know, any student that, you know, has just heard your great presentation and they're thinking, all right, I'm ready to apply, you know, when they're putting their resume together, can you talk a little bit about what you look for maybe in a resume, and how they might best stand out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've spent the last couple months looking at student resumes for our engineering internships here in Tonawanda. So for me, you know, you want to have content, you want to have good content on your resume. If we're talking about a student that maybe doesn't have any internship experience, but you have work experience, I'd like to see that on the resume. So we know you're going to school, but if you're also working in addition to going to school, you know, that means something to us as recruiters. We like to see that work ethic. But in addition to that, I would say don't just list work experience. If you don't have internship experience related to your major, list some projects that you've worked on in a couple different classes, meaningful projects. If it was a project that you had a leadership role in, I would say that'd be really good to list. We want to try to get a good snapshot of what you've done and what you've learned. So if you have some remaining space, I think it's even good to list some of the coursework that you've taken as it relates to the job. And I would always recommend, I mean, you don't need to have, 10 different versions of your resume, but I think depending on where you're applying, you might want to tailor the resume to the role. And we typically we'll ask you about your coursework. We'll ask you about what classes were your favorite, why were they your favorite, what classes did you not really care for. If you have an idea of your career path, we'll ask you that as well. But again, I just think it's important to list the projects if there are no internships. If you do have internships, definitely list those. But just try, you know, sometimes a resume will come across my desk that it's a student that has a terrific GPA. They list their GPA. We like that as well. That's another thing to mention. We look for students that have at least a 3.0 or higher. So a resume might come across my desk, fantastic GPA, but very little work experience, and there's not a lot to go on. There's not a lot of content on the resume. I would say put the time into building the resume out as much as possible. If you have experience with organizations on campus, or in particular leadership roles within those organizations, make sure you list that as well. But your resume should, you know, it's sometimes hard as a student to fill the entire page up, but that's why I would suggest the project-based work as an add-on, because I think that it adds value to the resume.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
I thought of another one, Lauren, while they think of questions.
Yep.
This merger with Praxair in 2018, it's very exciting. What do you think has been the biggest benefit from the merger?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's probably a loaded question, actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think depending on who you are, you might have some different answers. The biggest benefit financially to the company is now that we have this global power, this global buying power and global negotiation power versus us being two separate companies. So even in terms of things like procurement, when we're trying to purchase equipment or office supplies, we're able to negotiate on a different level because we are, you know, a bigger company than we were before. But in addition to that, I would say really the global aspect. I've talked more with people in different countries since we've gone through this merger than I ever have before, and exposure to different cultures. You know, everyone's in a different time zone, so you have to work with that. And sometimes you're communicating with people that may be 12 hours ahead of you. But that global aspect, I think, has really been a benefit to a lot of us. And then in addition to that, we've been hiring people and moving people around the globe like we've never done before. So for example, I just filled a finance position in Danbury, and we hired somebody from Singapore to come over. So aside from just interacting with folks globally, you know, over Zoom or Microsoft Teams or over email, we're actually moving those people. And so there's a lot of face-to-face interactions with people from different countries that you may not have interacted with before.
That's really great. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think it's good to mention too, I mean, as you guys are graduating and thinking about the types of companies you want to work for, I think it's good for you to get exposure to working at a large company, small company, regional company, global company, you know, in those first maybe 10 years of your experience out of school, get exposure to them, and then you can kind of figure out where you feel like you fit best and what feels right for you. Because sometimes working for a global company that's in 100 different countries isn't what you want. Maybe you want a smaller regional touch, but you're not going to find that out unless you get exposure to working in different environments.
Great. Looks like we have a question. I had a question about overseas operations and building plants and how facilities in other countries. How does Linde handle the difference of environmental compliance standard overseas, especially with regards to factory emissions?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, we've got experts in every country that really, they're subject matter experts in their country, in construction and building and requirements of that country. So, you know, usually, unless there's a country that maybe we haven't been in before, and to be honest, I'm not sure how that's handled, but we've worked in so many different countries that we usually have one person that's at least a subject matter expert, in particular on compliance. So that's a big focus for us. Our compliance group is global. We've got quite a few people in that area, but that's their specialty. So, you know, that can be a career path as well. Maybe you don't necessarily think of that right off the bat if you're graduating with an engineering degree. But sometimes you're not actually doing engineering work like building a plant, but you might work in safety or compliance or sustainability. And that compliance area is the area that would oversee the building of a plant in a new country and making sure that we're following the regulations.
So Lauren, I'm curious. So when you have a job opening, either an internship or for a job opening, what is the number of usual applicants you get, and then from there, how many you interview, and then for one position?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So just in general, let's say for our engineering internships, we usually receive somewhere between like 300 and 500 candidate applications. What I do is I sort through those based on application date. So I start with those folks that apply earliest, because that's always important. And then I sort them by major and by school. And I usually start to take a look at them that way in those types of buckets. But if we've got between 300 and 500 candidates, we usually would interview, I'd say about 50 of those. And then we would whittle down the list from there and probably offer to 20 of those candidates. Like for example, 20 openings for summer internship in our engineering department. So it's competitive, and that's why the resume really needs to stand out, because we're looking at so many of them. Again, make sure you list the GPA, the coursework, all of those things are really important to make sure that, when a recruiter is reviewing the resume, you're going to have a chance, because those are tough odds, and we realize that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Sure.
Lauren, does it help to have a LinkedIn profile to supplement your resume for the process? Do you look at LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really helpful. When I go physically, in a world where we were going to career fairs face to face and interacting with students, a lot of students will come up, have a chat with us about what the opportunities are at the company, hand me the resume, and I would always tell them, make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn. So I think the profile is really important. It's rather than me just getting emails in my inbox, I sometimes suggest to students that they contact me through LinkedIn, because my LinkedIn inbox isn't as flooded as my corporate email inbox is. So that's another thing I would say. That's another tip or secret to use, is if you're trying to contact a recruiter from a company, I would try to contact them through their LinkedIn account versus their email, where you might get buried. But the profile is really important. Try to have a picture on there if you have one, and make sure that the profile is complete.
Great advice. Thank you. You're going to get flooded today. I know it.
Yeah, that's fine. I love LinkedIn. I think it's a really great tool. Also a great tool for the students as well.
Yep. Great. Any other questions? Lauren, if you mentioned the internships at your corporate office in Danbury, is there any kind of advantage, say if you intern in that office and then you're interested in maybe the engineering rotational program, or the trainee program, is there any advantage to have already been an intern in the corporate office when then applying for the trainee program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say definitely. I mean, if you have to look at an internship as really a 12-week job interview. That's how we look at it for the students. And if you take an internship with us in Danbury, for example, and just knock it out of the park, do a really terrific job at what your internship is, then it's likely that your manager is going to help try to network you into a different role, like a rotation. So it is a really great foot in the door. And we like repeat students too. So if you come to us and you're a rising junior, that's attractive to us, because we could potentially have you intern with us for 2 summers before you even graduate. So the earlier the better. And we typically, in terms of who we like to hire for interns, most of our internships, we hire rising juniors. So the summer in between your sophomore year and junior year is ideal for us. We don't typically hire freshmen and sophomores. because we feel like our internships are a little bit more challenging and complex and better suited towards a student that's going into their junior or senior year.
Okay.
This has been wonderful, Lauren, the presentation and the organization, and we learned so much today. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that Linde is for everyone, for every student from every background.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter your interest, right?
Yep, there's literally something for everybody. And one thing too, just to kind of add on to that, once you get your foot in the door, once you have a job, you get a position with us, we're very open to moving people internally. It's very common that people will come to us right out of college. They might stay with us for 30 years, but maybe they work in like 10 different roles. So the company itself, the philosophy here, I think is very open-minded towards rotating people within different departments and different business units. And the more you rotate, the more of a valuable employee you are, just because your perspective is that much more broad. So yeah, it's a great place to work. We do have a lot of people that have been with us for 20, 30 years. It's very common to see that. So again, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you all on there. If you have questions about internships or jobs, we can always set up a call to discuss in more detail.
Great. Well, this was absolutely fabulous, Lauren. We can't thank you enough. And students, thank you for your time and engaging with Lauren. Take her advice, right? Make sure you look at that resume, that LinkedIn profile, reach out to career development too if you need help with any of that. Tolga, thank you for being here as well. And I think that'll wrap it up. But Lauren, thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks so much. Great to talk with you all.
Thank you, students.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.